Hi, I'm Susan Curry, and I'm a founding member of Pennypack Farm Education Center for Sustainable Food Systems. And it was started by a community of people who wanted to have access to locally grown organic food. The organic food was important to us for the health of our bodies and our families. But organic food also is important to the health of the watershed. In organic farming methods, you are not using any of the man-made synthetic chemicals that industrial agriculture uses. Those are typically in the area of fertilizers to make the land have enough nutrients in it for the plants to be able to draw up and produce. They are herbicides to handle weeds that are in competition with your plants. And they're pesticides to handle different kinds of pests that attack the plants or the fruit of the plants, therefore decreasing the production per acre of your farm. There are also fungicides and rodenticides and a bunch of other chemicals that industrial farmers use. Organic farming is generally done by small farmers, but it can also be done in an industrial mode. The kind of farms that are doing organic farming are either serving a restaurant clientele or a CSA. CSA stands for Community Supported Agriculture. It generally is a community in relationship with a farmer and a farm. The community buys the produce from the farmer in one lump sum at the beginning of the spring and then comes on a weekly basis to pick up their share of the harvest. There are different iterations of CSA farms. Sometimes they're boxed and delivered to people or delivered to an address and people go to that address. But CSA is a relationship between the community and the farmer. The CSA people are interested in how the farmer is growing, and they're also interested in keeping farming local. So organic methods is without the chemicals, and so what do we do instead? Well, one thing is that we tolerate more weeds. We live with weeds. We control the weeds, but we don't kill all the weeds. So here you see in this field, mowing has been happening between the rows of these snap peas as a way of keeping the weeds down. Closer to the plants themselves, we have to do either some hoeing or some hand pulling because we don't want to disturb any of the plants. But mowing is one of the major ways of controlling the weeds, and allowing them is another way. You know, some of these weeds have flowers on them and they provide food for pollinators, which is something we're interested in having more of on a farm. If without pollinators, you don't get your squash and you don't get your strawberries and you don't get your raspberries, and there's a lot of food that's a fruiting food you wouldn't get without pollinators. So we're interested in attracting pollinators, and we have a lot of practices to attract the pollinators. But some of the insects that are attracted are pests, and other farmers are using chemicals to try and control the pests. You have to kind of understand the life cycle of your insect pest in order to see where can you get in there and maneuver some way of containing them or reducing them. You know, you're not killing them necessarily. Here's our herb garden, which is a you-pick. The share members are allowed to pick a handful of whatever they need for the week. Here's a little oregano left over from last year. There's some rosemary. This is a fennel called bronze fennel. These are chives. We have a little trouble keeping ahead of the flowers. You have to head the flowers off, although there's a time in the spring when this is one of the most colorful spots on the farm because of these purple flowers. It's just a sea of purple flowers. Oregano flowers all season long. You can see lots of bees flying around here. We don't head these off because we are making sure the bees keep having flowers here. You can smell how lovely the marjoram is. Lots of bees here. Thyme is another thing that stays in flower for a good part of the growing season. So it's another one of the herbs that keeps the pollinators happy. We started this bunch of beds of plants that support health. We're learning how to harvest them, grow them, use them, turn them into remedies that would support different parts of our body system. So this is the skin body system. You can see calendulum and chamomile. There's some, actually read them. I think this is St. John's wort. Here's, can't read, it's lady's mantle here. So these are all skin system plants. This is the reproductive system. There's a lot of motherwort here that's gotten out of control. There's some yarrow here. This is the immunity system. There's some horehound here. We have some hyssop over here. It's a healing plant. Every farm, really, that's doing any kind of vegetables has a greenhouse. It was the first building that we got, and the reason for that is because it's where you start your plants. You start them in a greenhouse partly for weed control and pest control. It's in here that you can control the quality of soil. You can actually make your own soil, and what you put in the soil provides nutrients for it, and doesn't have any weed seeds in it, so it doesn't have to compete when it's a young plant. Watering this many plants can be done in about a 20-minute chore twice a day. So you can control the water needs, you control the nutrient needs, you're controlling that it doesn't have competition from insects and from weeds. You can control the temperature for it by how much you have the windows open or the fan on. So you're controlling a lot of the things that a plant needs to survive. Another thing about pest control is if you get the plants started earlier than they normally would start, then they're developing to a stage where they can produce their fruit before the insects are used to them being ready to produce their fruit. So the insects might be going through their own natural cycle that's a little bit off the cycle that you've started by planting things early. So that way you can get ahead of them. I want to show you something called a high tunnel. It's a lot like a greenhouse in that it's a hoop structure. Right? You'll see that the plants start here in the ground, live here all their lives. We harvest from them in here, so they live in here all of their lives. They don't get transplanted out there. One of the things that we do in here to help control the insects is that we rotate what we're planting in here. So the insects that like this squash, we didn't have squash here last year. So they don't know that this is a good place for them to find the squash. And if any of them happen to find squash here, it won't be squash that's here next year. It'll be tomatoes here next year, or peppers, or something else. So rotating the crops fools the insects a little bit. But we have a machine that comes down the row and forms the dirt, puts the dirt over the bottom of the plastic mulch, and then another machine comes by with two people sitting on it. There's a wheel that turns that pokes holes into the plastic. You can kind of see this hole here. And then the person, as the tractor moves on, the person that's sitting on a seat plunks a plant from a transplant from the greenhouse down here into the hole. It's called a water wheel transplanter. So we can plant this 300-foot row in about 15 minutes. Before we got this equipment, it would take us about 2.5 days to plant this row. We can produce more food in less, with less labor. And then these are called kind of permanent beds in that this will always be a bed here. The black plastic mulch is keeping the weeds out. You'll see further down the farm, I think, some places where the other side is up. Some of these have a white side. This is just a black one. Some of them have a white side because some plants prefer a cooler ground. We are watering our plants in a way that it doesn't have a lot of water wasted to evaporation, and also doesn't have a lot of water wasted to feed the weeds. We have a system here where some water is coming up. I'll point out to where it comes up from the ground. There's an underground pipes here, and then we tap these drip tapes. This is normally a very flat tape, and about every 6 inches it has a little pinprick hole in it. So when we turn this on and there's water flowing through here, it delivers water just exactly to where the plants are, giving the plants the water they need. So it's a very efficient water system. It's a conservation of water. And we would attach this system to here with a specific kind of attachment and then feed it water. You use these flow valves a lot. When it's opposite or perpendicular to the way the pipe is flowing, that's off. If I turned it this way, that would be on. We have a very unique model of farming, and we're trying to get a few more of them started, where it was a community of people that went out to try and find a farm. And all of the farmers within a 5-mile radius, which was our criteria, did not want to switch to organic methods. And they did not want to switch to being a CSA farmer. 2 reasons. about the organic methods is that they heard it was labor intensive, which would mean they would have more labor costs. And another thing about organic is that because you are doing more things by hand to handle the insects and the weeds, there's a learning curve in learning, what is the life cycle of the plant? When can I, or of the insect, when can I interrupt that life cycle so that it won't attack my plants? A CSA farm is growing food for, people. They don't want just 15 crops that the farmer already knows how to grow. They're very interested in 50, 60, 80, 90, 100 different varieties of crops. And these farmers that were growing locally were pretty much focusing on 15 different crops or something like that. They didn't want the learning curve of how do I grow heirloom tomatoes. It was a challenge that they didn't want to take on. So anyways, our CSA farm, the community went out and found some land. We leased this land. We leased 24 acres, which goes out beyond that place where the trees curve in, goes way out to that brown roof out there, if you can see that. It's 24 acres. 15 of the acres are enclosed within a 10-foot high deer fence. And if you have anything shorter than a 10-foot high deer fence, you're going to have deer. I just want to show something about the soil quality. When we inherited this farm, it was a depleted cornfield. I say depleted because they'd grown corn or soy on it, alternating for about 30 years, and they hadn't been putting any organic matter back in. When I dig down into this is a fairly good colored, you can tell that it's a sandy loam, kind of, or a clay loam kind of soil. This is soil that's been compacted. And this was kind of the soil that we got. It's not going to hold water. It cakes when there's sun's on it. You can't get your hands down in it. You can't work it. Even going down, I'm getting stopped at about 2 inches here. So the soil itself just needs to have more organic matter added to it. Here's some white plastic mulch. It's the same as the black plastic mulch, but the white side is up. So whatever crops would be planted in here, and I can't even tell, they're harvesting things from here already. So it looks like it's kale. Yeah, it's kale. It likes a cooler soil, so the white reflects the heat. This is some vetch here, this pretty purple flower. If you look at it, it has kind of a pea-like leaf structure. And this is one of the nitrogen-fixing cover crops that a lot of farmers are using these days. When you inherit clay soil, you have to amend the soil, or you're never going to get good productivity out of it. The first kind of amendments that we put on were a fish emulsion. Every year for the first 6 years, we've actually applied about 1 inch or 2 layer of mushroom compost soil, mushroom soil it's called, to help add matter in. Sometimes we use the leaves before they've broken down into a compost as a mulch. But once they've broken down, which it usually takes about 2 years, if you're not turning the piles, it takes about 2 years for the microbes and the bacteria and any worms and bugs that are, worming them ways in and out of the pile to break down the leaves into something that you can put onto the land. You can see down here stuff that's gotten broken down. It's a dark brown. It adds organic matter to the soil. Organic matter lets the water flow through it when it rains, holds the water in the soil so that the water doesn't just seep down and you don't have water for the roots of the plants, and provides a little nitrogen. When you have the brown, you're getting nitrogen. If you look at the grass, right about here, it starts being a darker colored grass. This was where the chicken fence was a month ago. We want to move the chickens at least every month. It's good if we can move them a little more often than that so that they get new scratch, new insects, new grass, and so that they don't scorch the land with their nitrogen inputs. To have the coop for safety and for a place where the chickens can lay their eggs. There are predators. There are hawks during the daytime. There are owls at nighttime. There are some other ground-dwelling predators, so they mostly want to go inside the coop at nighttime for safety.
Hi, my name is Dennis Reel. I'm one of the farmers here at Pennypack, and we're just walking over to the apiary. I was talking with the guy who does our bees, and I asked him because I know about the sudden hive death syndrome that I've seen, and so I was concerned that we had problems with our hives as well. He said it's probably more a problem for big commercial honey operations that basically use sugar and corn syrup and other things to feed the bees and produce honey in bigger quantities. Here, while we're doing mostly just these are for pollination and for small quantities of honey for our shareholders, there has been no problem. In fact, he says that all of our hives are very healthy. The guy who initially diagnosed the syndrome said that there are chemical triggers. Considering that you don't see this problem on organic farms, I would tend to, if I had to make a guess, I would say that that is pesticides and herbicides and insecticides are probably contributing to the problem of the sudden death of hives in the area. This organic farm has no problem so far, knock on wood, with sudden death syndrome of hives.
Farms should have bee hives on the farm. I don't know what they would do to get pollination if they didn't.